The smell of burnt skin and rancid fat filled the air as Brother Sebastian burst out of his cell with a cry that echoed throughout the gallery. A cry that contained no prayer, only fear. The cell window had been smashed from the inside, and grease, seemingly human, was caked around the edge on the limestone. Pieces of cloth bearing the Holy Cross emblem were still burning in the fireplace, and foul-smelling streams, resembling the discharge from festering sores, ran across the floor. Inquisitor Lorenzo del Cardo, the 60-year-old head of the courts of heresy in southern Castile, was found on the floor of his chamber, face down, his skin peeling away from his skull like boiled film from a lamb's head. According to the first report from the brethren, he died during the night alone, behind closed doors, with no signs of violence, but the smell of decay did not arise after death, but many days before it. According to the monastery records, Lorenzo stopped eating 9 days before his death. He demanded to be given only water infused with licorice and the ashes of burned heretics. His tongue turned black, his voice became hoarse, and his eyes became inflamed, like those of a person suffering from paralysis. Witnessing monks wrote that during the last weeks of his life, he wore a thick leather mask, supposedly to protect himself from sulfur fumes, but in reality, to hide the distortion of his face. The first signs of poisoning became apparent at the end of April, when Lorenzo began to experience spasms in his lower jaw, followed by difficulty breathing. He complained of itching under his skin and mice crawling on his face from the inside. This coincided with a visit from a delegation from Montellara, a count suspected of hiding books banned by the Bull of Purity. That night, after the visit, a fire broke out in the Inquisitor's cell. A stack of scrolls was burning, among which were later identified court records with the sentences of more than 30 villagers who had been burned to death. Not a single name could be recovered. The ink had been eaten away by acid. The monastery's medic, Brother Esteban, wrote in one of his reports to the Archbishop of Toledo, "The Most Holy Father shows signs of internal decay. His tongue is gray, his pulse is barely discernible, his secretions are foul-smelling and bloody. The skin on his forehead is swollen with blisters, as if from boiling water. One eye has almost popped out." He recommended an autopsy to determine the nature of the illness, but the body was sealed in a coffin immediately after death, without permission for an autopsy. The reasons were political. On the night of Lorenzo's death, on orders from Rome, 3 canons of the cathedral were arrested. One of them, Dominic de Fuenza, was later found dead with his throat cut by a piece of glass, which had traces of blood and sulfur on it. From the private notes of Brother Alonso, who served as Lorenzo's assistant for the last 3 years, "The mask smells of rot. He doesn't even take it off when he washes his face. I saw him crying through the slits, pus dripping from his chin. Sometimes he calls me at night and asks me to rub salt into his back. He says it draws the evil out. His fingernails have fallen off, and I hid them so the brothers wouldn't see." According to official documents, a month before his death, Lorenzo signed a decree allowing the accelerated burning of persons suspected of internal heresy, that is, those who had not uttered anything heretical, but were suspected of spiritual contagion. This gave rise to numerous denunciations. The burnings took place at night. The Inquisitor himself, despite his complete infirmity, ordered that he be carried in a chair to the place of execution. Eyewitnesses claimed that he sentenced women with children to be burned, barely able to utter the words due to festering cracks in his throat. One of the secret observers, an agent of the Castilian crown, wrote in his report, "His death will be a relief. He is rotting away, sitting on a throne made of skin. His speech is incomprehensible, but his fear is palpable to all. He ordered the windows of his chamber to be sewn shut so that the angel of death would not see his face." His face really did become unrecognizable. Brother Sebastian, who was the first to enter the cell after his death, was later transferred to another monastery, and refused to talk about what he had seen. Only in a letter written shortly before his death did he confess. I saw his face slide to the floor like wax. Underneath was only a skull. He was still breathing. Who poisoned Lorenzo and why remains a mystery. Officially, his death was recorded as natural causes due to internal decay caused by old age and service. But the Inquisition archives contain a sealed record. The poison was in the oil was in the lamp. He placed the lamp there himself as a sign of purification. The coffin, made of raw cypress wood, was carried out through the back door of the monastery in the dark, without singing or a cross. It was carried by novices whose names had not previously appeared in the monastery's records. By order of the archdeacon, the coffin was not to be opened under any circumstances. The late Inquisitor Lorenzo del Cardo was buried in an abandoned crypt under the Cathedral of San Blas, next to the bodies of lepers and those condemned to be burned at the stake, whose remains had once been hidden in the ground at night. There was no name on the tombstone, only an engraved prayer for silence. 3 days after the burial, Brother Esteban was found dead in his cell, his tongue bitten off. A note was left on the table, written in uneven handwriting. He came at night, faceless. His body was not autopsied. The following weeks were tense. Confessions became more frequent in the monastery, with some monks claiming that barefoot footsteps could be heard in the corridors at night, accompanied by the smell of burning flesh. Several ministers disappeared from the pulpit. One was found outside the city, with his heart cut out and smeared on his chest. The Holy Tribunal in Toledo sent a commission to investigate the circumstances of the Inquisitor's death. However, upon arrival, 3 of the 7 members of the delegation fell ill. All developed a severe form of fever with facial swelling and purulent skin lesions. 2 were diagnosed with deformation of the oral cavity. One of the brothers described the symptoms. The lips turn black, the skin peels off the gums. They consume only dill, tincture, and opium. One of the commissioners prayed silently, his mouth sealed shut as if with lead. Perhaps the source of the disease was in Lorenzo's cell itself. By order of the abbot, the entrance was bricked up. However, a report from the captain of the city guard noted traces of the bricked-up door being opened were found 8 days after it was sealed. It has not been established who entered, but the lock was opened from the inside. Rumors spread beyond the monastery. Townspeople began leaving bags of salt and dried garlic at the gates of the cathedral. Some claimed to have seen the Inquisitor in the streets, wearing a mask from which a liquid oozed like from a boiled body. A local herb seller, previously convicted but pardoned by Lorenzo himself, disappeared. Her house was found burned out from the inside. On the floor was a phrase scratched with charcoal. He said he hadn't finished the interrogation yet. Archbishop Ribeiro ordered the coffin to be opened, secretly at night, behind closed doors. The 3 novices who witnessed this later disappeared, but Brother Inigo, the youngest of those who accompanied them, wrote in his personal diary a year before his death. We opened the lid. The boards inside were half rotten, as if from acid, but there was no body, only a mask. Under it was a piece of skin and 2 teeth. On the same day, part of the archives of the San Blas department burned down. The fire started in the section where the files of heretics convicted over the past 30 years were kept. Among the surviving fragments is a badly charred sheet with part of a prayer inserted into the sentence of the Inquisitor Lorenzo, not for forgiveness, but for removal, not for consolation, but for elimination. Those who are unknown shall not be brought to trial. The monastic brotherhood was partially disbanded. 5 cells remained sealed. No new novices were accepted. The executions of heretics were suspended. According to some historians, during these weeks, Catholic power in the region was effectively weakened. The archbishop and his chancellery were hiding in the fortress, and some of the courts were transferred to the civil authorities. An order arrived from Rome: clear the see, appoint a new judge, recognize the death of the Inquisitor, as a result of physical exhaustion and spiritual illness. Do not spread fear. But fear was already in every word. People did not utter Lorenzo's name. The bishops who replaced him did not live in the bishops' quarters. The disappearance of 2 new clerics was recorded in the cathedral. The last of them left a note in the office. He did not die, he dissolved. His face is what remains of him. 32 days passed since the burial. When the bishop's chair of San Blas was officially declared vacant, no one appointed a new inquisitor. Over the following months, all trials of heretics within the diocese were suspended. Scribes in Tarragona and Seville reported a sudden drop in the number of denunciations and the refusal of some church notaries to accept accusations without the personal signature of the archbishop. Lord Ribeiro, who received a letter from Cardinal Alfonso demanding that the trials be resumed, replied, "When an inquisitor dies and his face melts, not only his skin melts away, but also his mandate. We are afraid of repeating the mistake." It soon became clear that Lorenzo del Carto had been severely poisoned at the time of his death. A secret medical report sent to the papal chancellery contains the following excerpt. Black deposits typical of the consumption of mercury-based resinous compounds and acetic acid were found on the inner walls of the stomach. The gums are destroyed. The larynx is partially melted. The poisoning occurred slowly through food and inhalation of vapors. It is possible that the poison was also applied to the skin through ritual ointments. The name of the alleged poisoner was kept secret for a long time, but years later, in one of the reports of the Spanish consul in Venice, it was mentioned, "There is reasonable suspicion that the poison was mixed into the inquisitor's food by a woman who was pardoned by him in 1466 during a witchcraft trial. She disappeared a day after his death. Later, she was allegedly seen in Naples, wearing a mask covering her entire face." Lorenzo's murder caused a chain reaction. Some canons began to publicly renounce the Inquisition. About 20 cases were reviewed. Those convicted of heresy had their property returned. In Segovia, a group of priests openly burned the files that had previously belonged to Lorenzo. They were accused of sacrilege, but their trial was postponed due to unexplained circumstances. According to legend, 3 of these priests died within a week. All of them suffered from inflammation of the facial tissues, accompanied by unbearable pain, persecution mania, and hallucinations. The Chronicle of the Monastery of San Marco contains the following entry. "Cursed is he who wears the face of Lorenzo. The skin will fall from his face, and pus will flow from his tongue. He will not be reflected in a mirror, and if he is, it will not be immediately." The San Blas parish was officially closed 9 months later. The premises were sealed, and the relics were transferred to neighboring churches. Later, the building itself was demolished, but the rumors remained. A belief spread among the people that Lorenzo's mask had been preserved, and that if you put it on your face, you could gain power over people, but lose your flesh. In some villages, children still call the faceless shadows near the church Lorenzians. Letters from ambassadors in Rome recorded the Vatican's concern. Fear has become stronger than faith. Justice is disappearing. The structures of power are blurred. The people are silent, but they do not pray. 15 years after his death, a man was found in a chapel in Utrecht, decayed during his lifetime, with a metal mask grown onto his face. According to reports, he called himself the bearer of justice and read sentences in Latin, which he did not know. He was burned, but his body did not burn completely. The skull cracked open, and liquid resembling molten wax flowed out. The conclusion of the papal physician, based on the remains of the body, reads, "The death in question cannot be explained by natural causes. The synthesis of tissue damage coincides with the descriptions of the condition of the deceased Lorenzo. It was as if the body had refused to live, and the face had refused to be a face." After that, the Inquisition in western Spain was partially disbanded. The courts of heresy in Zaragoza and Cuenca were suspended for 20 years. Many believed that justice itself had been poisoned by its executors. It was said that the death of Inquisitor Lorenzo was not revenge, but retribution, that his face melted because it should not have belonged to a human being. And so, the last great Inquisitor of San Blas disappeared, not by the sword, not from old age, but because he himself became a mirror of pain, which he had looked into for too long without repentance.